Most people think wealth has a certain look. They imagine luxury cars in the driveway, designer clothes, expensive watches, and huge homes in exclusive neighborhoods. When people picture someone rich, they usually picture someone who clearly looks rich. But real wealth often looks completely different. There is a man who parks the same car in his office parking lot every single morning. It's an old Honda Civic from more than a decade ago. The paint is faded, the interior is worn, and there's a small dent on the rear bumper. Nothing about the car suggests success. If anything, it looks like the kind of car someone drives when they are trying to save money. His coworkers see the car every day and quietly form the same assumption. They assume he is struggling. Maybe he's living paycheck to paycheck. Maybe he's dealing with debt. Maybe he simply hasn't gotten ahead yet. What they don't know is that the man driving that car has more than $4 million invested in index funds. His house is completely paid off. His retirement accounts have been maxed out every year for decades. His investments generate more money annually than many people earn from their jobs. Technically, he could retire tomorrow and never worry about money again. But he doesn't, and the car he drives is not a mistake. It's a strategy. Because the people who quietly build wealth understand something that most people never realize. Looking rich and being rich are two very different things. In fact, in many cases, they move in opposite directions. This idea sounds strange at first. Why would someone who has money intentionally avoid looking wealthy? Why not upgrade the car? Why not enjoy luxury? Why not show the world that you made it? But decades of research on millionaire behavior reveal a surprising pattern. Most real millionaires don't look rich. Researchers Thomas Stanley and William Danko spent years studying thousands of wealthy Americans. Their work eventually became the famous book, The Millionaire Next Door. What they discovered completely challenged the popular image of wealth. Most millionaires live in middle-class neighborhoods. They shop at regular stores. They drive practical cars. Many of their neighbors have absolutely no idea they are wealthy. In fact, the most common cars driven by millionaires are Toyota, Honda, and Ford. Not Ferrari, not Lamborghini, not Bentley. Just reliable cars that blend into any parking lot in America. These people could easily afford luxury vehicles, but they choose not to because they understand something about money that many people never learn. Every dollar spent trying to look wealthy is a dollar that cannot grow into actual wealth, and the difference between those two choices compounds over time. Imagine two people who both earn $200,000 per year. From the outside, their lives look similar, but their spending habits are completely different. The first person spends heavily on lifestyle, luxury cars, designer clothes, expensive restaurants, high-end vacations. From the outside, this person looks successful. People admire their lifestyle. They appear wealthy, but they only manage to save about 5% of their income. That means roughly $10,000 per year goes toward building wealth. Now imagine the second person. They live comfortably but modestly. They drive a normal car. They avoid unnecessary status purchases. Instead of spending everything they earn, they save and invest 25% of their income. That's $50,000 invested every single year. At an average market return of 7% per year, the difference between these two lifestyles becomes enormous over time. After 25 years, the first person accumulates roughly $680,000. The second person accumulates more than $3 million. One person looks wealthy. The other actually becomes wealthy. And the gap between them continues to widen every year. This is why many of the people who appear rich are often financially fragile. And many of the people who appear ordinary are quietly becoming financially powerful. The reason this happens is deeply connected to human psychology. Humans are social creatures. We constantly compare ourselves to others. We want recognition. We want respect. And one of the easiest ways to signal success is through visible spending. Cars, clothes, watches, homes, vacations. These purchases act like signals to the world. They communicate status without saying a word. Economists call this conspicuous consumption, buying things not primarily for usefulness, but for the message they send. A $50 watch tells time. A $50,000 watch also tells time. But the expensive one sends a signal. The signal itself becomes the product. The problem is that chasing signals quietly destroys the financial foundation needed to build real wealth. Because most luxury purchases come with something called opportunity cost. Opportunity cost means what you give up by choosing one option instead of another. For example, imagine buying an $80,000 luxury car instead of a $30,000 practical car. The extra $50,000 doesn't just disappear. It represents money that could have been invested. If that $50,000 were invested at an average return of 7% per year for 25 years, it would grow to roughly $270,000. That's the real price of the luxury car. Not 50,000, 270,000. And this hidden cost applies to almost every status purchase people make. Designer handbags, luxury watches, expensive upgrades, premium vehicles. Each one quietly subtracts from the money that could have been compounding in investments. Meanwhile, the people who ignore these signals and focus on saving allow time to work in their favor. Compounding is incredibly powerful, but it requires patience and it requires discipline. The earlier money is invested, the longer it has to grow, which means every unnecessary expense today reduces financial freedom decades later. But the advantages of looking financially ordinary go beyond investing more money. Looking poor can actually create strategic advantages in everyday life. For example, negotiation. When people believe you have a lot of money, they treat you differently. Salespeople push higher priced options. Contractors may quote higher numbers. Service providers assume you can afford premium pricing. But when you appear financially average, people treat you like an average customer. You receive standard pricing instead of premium pricing. Over an entire lifetime of purchases, that difference can save an enormous amount of money. Visible wealth also creates social complications. When people believe you have money, expectations change. Friends may expect you to spend more. Family members may ask for financial help. Colleagues may treat you differently. Sometimes even relationships become harder to evaluate. You begin wondering whether people value you for who you are or for what you have. But someone who appears middle class avoids these problems. Their wealth remains invisible. Their relationships remain natural. People treat them normally. Nobody feels intimidated. Nobody feels entitled to their money. And that simplicity has real value. There are also security benefits. People who publicly display wealth often attract unwanted attention. Financial scammers frequently target individuals who appear wealthy online. Identity theft, investment scams, fraudulent schemes. The more visibly wealthy someone appears, the bigger the target they become. But someone living a modest lifestyle rarely attracts that kind of attention. Their financial life remains private. Quiet wealth acts like a form of protection. But perhaps the most powerful advantage of invisible wealth is psychological, because visible wealth often creates pressure. Once someone builds an identity around expensive things, maintaining that image becomes exhausting. The luxury car must be replaced. The lifestyle must keep escalating. the spending must continue to prove success. It becomes a treadmill that never stops. But the person who rejects that game experiences something very different. Their identity is not tied to what they consume. They don't feel pressure to prove anything. Their confidence comes from financial security instead of social approval. They know they can handle emergencies. They know they have options. They know they could walk away from a bad job if they needed to. That quiet security changes how someone experiences life. Decisions become less stressful. Money stops controlling every choice. And freedom becomes possible. Because the true purpose of money was never status. It was freedom. Freedom from constant financial stress. Freedom from dependence on a paycheck. Freedom to choose how to spend your time. And ironically, the people who achieve this freedom often look the least wealthy on the surface. They drive ordinary cars. They live below their means. They invest consistently. They ignore social pressure. And over decades, those quiet decisions compound into extraordinary results. Because real wealth is rarely visible. It does not appear in a parking lot. It does not appear in clothing brands. It does not appear in social media posts. Real wealth exists in the assets you own, the investments growing quietly in the background, the financial freedom those assets eventually create. The man driving the old Honda Civic understands something his coworkers may never realize. The car in the parking lot doesn't represent failure. It represents discipline. It represents patience. It represents thousands of small financial decisions made over decades. And those decisions created something far more valuable than a luxury car. They created freedom. Because wealth is not about what people see. Wealth is about what you keep. But there is another layer to this idea that most people never think about. Looking poor does something very powerful to the way the world treats you. It lowers expectations. When people believe you are wealthy, every interaction changes in subtle ways. Service providers assume you can afford more. Friends assume you should spend more. Family members may assume you should help financially. Even strangers begin to treat you differently, sometimes with admiration, sometimes with jealousy, sometimes with resentment. Visible wealth attracts attention, and attention is not always a good thing. When someone drives a flashy car, people notice. When someone wears expensive brands, people notice. When someone constantly displays luxury online, people definitely notice. But attention creates pressure. Because once people see you as successful, they expect you to maintain that image. If the car changes to something cheaper, questions appear. If the lifestyle slows down, people notice. If spending decreases, others may assume something is wrong. Visible wealth creates a social performance that never ends. You have to keep proving the image you created. But someone who chooses to look financially ordinary avoids this game entirely. They are free from the pressure of performance. No one expects them to upgrade their car every few years. No one expects luxury vacations. No one expects expensive gifts. Their life becomes simpler. And simplicity has enormous financial power. Because the less pressure you feel to impress others, the easier it becomes to make rational financial decisions. Instead of asking, "What will people think?" you begin asking a much better question. What will make my future stronger? That shift in thinking changes everything. Suddenly, investments become more attractive than status purchases. Financial security becomes more satisfying than social approval. Long-term freedom becomes more valuable than short-term validation. And over time, those decisions begin to compound. The interesting thing about wealth is that it grows quietly. It doesn't grow through dramatic moments. It grows through small decisions repeated thousands of times. Choosing the practical car, skipping unnecessary upgrades, investing consistently, ignoring trends designed to trigger spending. Each decision feels small in the moment, but together, they create enormous momentum. A person who saves and invests $50,000 per year may not look wealthy after the first year, or even the fifth year. But after 20 years, the results become extraordinary. And by the time 30 years have passed, the financial difference becomes almost impossible to ignore. This is why many self-made millionaires describe wealth building as boring. Not exciting, not glamorous, just consistent. The habits that build wealth are usually simple. Spend less than you earn. Invest the difference. Avoid unnecessary lifestyle inflation. Repeat this process for decades. The formula is simple, but the challenge is psychological because modern culture constantly pushes people in the opposite direction. Advertising tells us that buying things will improve our identity. Social media encourages people to display their lifestyle. Luxury brands sell the idea that success must be visible. And when people are surrounded by these messages every day, it becomes easy to believe that appearing successful is the same thing as becoming successful. But the numbers tell a very different story. True wealth rarely comes from dramatic financial moves. It comes from consistent behavior over long periods of time. It comes from patience, from discipline, from ignoring social pressure. And that is why many wealthy people intentionally live below their means, even after they become financially successful. They understand that the habits that built their wealth are the same habits that protect it. If they suddenly begin spending aggressively, the system that created their financial security begins to weaken. But when they maintain the same disciplined habits, their wealth continues to grow quietly, year after year, decade after decade. Eventually, something interesting happens. The person who once appeared ordinary becomes financially unstoppable. Their investments begin generating significant income. Their financial risk decreases. Their choices expand. They are no longer forced to work. They choose to work.